In downtown Austin, a seasoned business director was about to face the ultimate corporate betrayal. What started as a triumphant walk into her sunlit office after closing deals with 8 Fortune 500 companies took a shocking turn when she found herself summoned to a cryptic HR meeting. Isabel Torres wasn't your typical business development director. For nearly a decade, she had dedicated her life to nurturing client partnerships, known for an uncanny ability to turn skepticism into trust and close deals others thought impossible. When she encountered her own CEO quietly orchestrating her demotion to night security mere days after her record-breaking quarter, she had no idea she was stepping into a battle for her professional soul. Isabel's quiet grace gave way to a fierce determination that would lead to the collapse of corporate illusions and the birth of a consultancy built on integrity. What began as a humiliating demotion would become her reinvention. The Austin tech community would never be the same after witnessing how one overlooked veteran turned sabotage into an unstoppable independent empire. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Clarity Bridge's downtown Austin headquarters, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors. Isabel Torres walked through the lobby with her usual measured stride, her leather portfolio tucked under one arm, the weight of 8 signed contracts still feeling surreal after 3 days. 8 Fortune 500 companies, in a single quarter. She'd been at Clarity Bridge for nearly a decade, climbing from senior account manager to business development director through sheer persistence and an uncanny ability to read what clients actually needed versus what they claimed they wanted. But this was different. This was the kind of quarter that redefined a company's trajectory. The elevator hummed as it carried her to the 3rd floor, where her team was already gathering for their weekly strategy session. Through the glass conference room walls, she could see them shuffling through printouts, laptops open, the familiar pre-meeting energy of people who knew they were part of something significant. Marcus Chen, her lead solutions architect, practically bounced out of his chair as she entered. "I still can't believe Meridian Global signed yesterday. That was supposed to be a maybe for Q4. She set down her portfolio and smiled. "They called Tuesday night, said they'd been watching our deployment with Sterling Industries, and wanted in before their competitors caught wind." The room erupted in quiet celebration, the kind of professional enthusiasm that came from people who understood the months of groundwork that made overnight success possible. Isabel had spent the better part of 2 years nurturing relationships at these companies, attending industry conferences not as a vendor but as a contributor, sharing insights that had nothing to do with immediate sales. "What's next?" asked Jennifer Kim, their integration specialist. "Please tell me we're not diving straight into implementation without at least acknowledging that we just landed the biggest quarterly haul in company history." Isabel glanced around the table at faces she'd hired, trained, and watched grow into seasoned professionals. "We celebrate by making sure every single one of these clients gets the experience they signed up for. But yes, Jennifer, we're also going to take the team out for dinner Friday. Somewhere with cloth napkins." Laughter rippled through the room as they dove into the logistics of coordinating 8 major rollouts simultaneously. Isabel listened to the technical discussions with half her attention, the other half processing the strange absence of any official recognition from leadership. No company-wide email, no executive acknowledgement, not even a congratulatory message from Dylan Pace, the new CEO who'd taken over 6 months ago. She pushed the thought aside. Recognition was nice, but results spoke louder than corporate fanfare. As the meeting wound down, Isabel caught sight of movement through the glass wall. Dylan stood on the executive balcony overlooking the main floor, phone pressed to his ear, his gaze fixed on their conference room. When their eyes met, he offered a brief nod and what might have been a smile before turning away. Something about the interaction left her unsettled, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Dylan was young, probably 15 years her junior, and had arrived with the backing of Clarity Bridge's new investors. His background was impressive on paper: Stanford MBA, 2 successful exits, a reputation for modernizing legacy operations. But in 6 months, their interactions had been limited to polite exchanges in the hallway, and his brief appearances at company meetings where he spoke in buzzwords about synergistic disruption and value stack optimization. Earth to Isabel, Marcus said, snapping her back to the present. You okay? You look like you're trying to solve a puzzle. Just thinking about capacity planning, she said, though that wasn't entirely true. We're going to need to be strategic about resource allocation. The team spent another 20 minutes mapping out timelines before dispersing to their respective tasks. Isabel remained in the conference room, reviewing her notes and feeling the familiar satisfaction of a plan coming together. This was the part of her job she loved most, the moment when complexity resolved into clarity, when months of relationship building crystallized into tangible results. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. How's the conquering hero today? Should I pick up champagne for tonight? Isabel smiled, typing back. Let's see if anyone else notices the conquering first, but yes to champagne either way. She packed up her materials and headed back to her office, a corner space with a view of the Colorado River that she'd earned through a decade of steady performance. Her assistant, Patricia, looked up from her desk with a knowing grin. 3 more congratulatory emails came in this morning, Patricia said, including one from that executive at Pinnacle Corp who said, and I quote, Isabel Torres is the reason we chose Clarity Bridge over the competition. Forward those to the team, Isabel said. They did the technical heavy lifting. Already done. But Isabel, Patricia's voice carried a note of concern. I tried to schedule the client kickoff meetings for next week like you asked, but Dylan's office requested a hold on all external communications until further notice. Said something about coordinating messaging strategy. Isabel paused, her hand on her office door. Did they say when we'd get clearance? Just soon, Patricia shrugged apologetically. I pushed back, mentioned these are time-sensitive implementations, but got the standard corporate runaround. I'll handle it, Isabel said, though a small knot of worry began forming in her stomach. In 10 years at Clarity Bridge, she'd never had leadership interfere with client communications after contracts were signed. Implementation was her domain, and the company had always trusted her to manage it. She spent the rest of the day catching up on administrative tasks and fielding calls from her new clients, all of whom were eager to begin the onboarding process. Each conversation reinforced what she already knew. These weren't just contracts, they were relationships. The executive she'd won over had bought into her vision, her expertise, her personal commitment to their success. By 6 o'clock, the office had largely emptied out. Isabel gathered her things and headed for the parking garage, the weight of the day settling into her shoulder. As she walked past the executive balcony, she noticed Dylan's office light still on, voices carrying through the partially open door. She caught fragments of conversation. She quickened her pace, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping, but the phrases echoed in her mind as she drove home through Austin's evening traffic. Rosa was already in the kitchen when Isabel arrived, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting her apron as she worked on what looked like empanada. The warm smell of cumin and paprika filled the air, immediately grounding Isabel in the comfort of home. There she is, Rosa said, looking up with a smile that had been melting Isabel's heart for 23 years. The woman who just rewrote Clarity Bridge's quarterly projection. Isabel set down her portfolio and wrapped her arms around Rosa's waist from behind, breathing in the familiar scent of her wife's perfume mixed with baking spices. It feels too good to be true sometimes. What do you mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm just not used to things going this well. Isabel released her hold and leaned against the counter. Dylan's been strange lately, distant, and now they're putting holds on client communications for no clear reason. Rosa turned to face her, wiping her hands on her apron. Honey, you just delivered the biggest win in company history. If Dylan's being strange, it's probably because he's trying to figure out how to take credit for it. Rosa, I'm serious. You've been there 10 years. You built those relationships long before he showed up. Some people get nervous when they realize they're not the smartest person in the room. Isabel wanted to dismiss the concern, but something about Rosa's words resonated. She'd seen it before in previous positions. The way certain leaders became uncomfortable when someone else's success threw their own contributions into question. Maybe I'm overthinking it, Isabel said. We'll see what happens with the investor presentation next month. If Dylan wants to showcase the wins, That's fine. I just want to make sure the clients get what they paid for. Rosa studied her face with the kind of attention that came from decades of marriage. You know what I think? I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do. And if Dylan or anyone else has a problem with that, they can deal with it. They opened the champagne anyway, toasting not just the contracts but the quiet satisfaction of work well done. As they sat on their back porch watching the sun set over the Austin skyline, Isabel felt the tension of the day begin to ease. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new implementations, new opportunities to prove that relationships and results mattered more than corporate theater. She had no idea that by tomorrow evening her entire world would be turned upside down. The calendar notification appeared on Isabel's phone at 7:20. No context, no agenda, just the stark efficiency of corporate scheduling that somehow managed to feel ominous. Isabel stared at the notification while her coffee cooled in her hand. In 10 years at Clarity Bridge, she'd never received a meeting request without some indication of purpose. Budget reviews came with budget review in the subject line. Strategy sessions were labeled accordingly. This was just nothing. She arrived at conference room B 3 minutes early, a habit ingrained from years of client meetings where punctuality conveyed respect. The room was smaller than the spaces where she usually conducted business. No windows, no view, just beige walls, and the kind of utilitarian furniture that suggested this conversation wouldn't be pleasant. Dylan was already seated at the head of the rectangular table, his posture casual but his eyes sharp. Beside him sat Lorraine Walsh from HR, her legal pad open, pen poised like a weapon. Isabel had worked with Lorraine on hiring decisions for years, but today her smile felt different, professionally warm but emotionally distant. Isabel, thanks for coming, Dylan said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Please, sit. She settled into the chair, setting her portfolio on the table out of habit. The silence stretched just long enough to feel uncomfortable before Dylan cleared his throat. We've been evaluating team structure across all departments, he began, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who'd delivered this speech before. As Clarity Bridge evolves, we need to ensure our leadership presentation aligns with our strategic vision moving forward. Isabel felt her stomach tighten. She'd heard enough corporate speak to recognize the setup for bad news, but the specifics remained frustratingly vague. What does that mean exactly? Lorraine jumped in with the kind of seamless tag team precision that suggested this conversation had been choreographed. We're implementing a new organizational structure, designed to eliminate redundancies and streamline decision-making process. Your role will be transitioning to better support these objectives. My role? Dylan leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. Effective immediately, you'll be moving into a new position, Internal Operations Coordinator. It's a lateral move, not a demotion, but it will involve different responsibilities. Isabel's mind raced. Internal Operations Coordinator wasn't a title she'd ever heard used at Clarity Bridge. What kind of responsibilities? Facility oversight, security protocols, operational continuity. Lorraine read from her note. You'll be working night shifts to ensure 24/7 coverage of our critical systems. The words hit like a physical blow. Night shifts, security protocols. They were making her a security guard. After 10 years of building relationships, closing deals, and managing complex implementations, they were assigning her to walk empty hallways with a flashlight. I'm sorry, Isabel said, her voice carefully controlled. Are you telling me that 3 days after I closed 8 Fortune 500 contracts, you're reassigning me to night security? Dylan's expression didn't change. This isn't about your recent performance, Isabel. It's about positioning Clarity Bridge for the next phase of growth. Our investors are looking for a dynamic, forward-thinking leadership team that represents the future of our industry. The subtext was clear, even if he wouldn't say it directly. At 59, with her salt and pepper hair and her preference for substance over style, Isabel didn't fit the image Dylan wanted to project. She was too old, too established, too much a reminder of what the company had been rather than what it aspired to become. The Fortune 500 contracts will be managed by our existing team structure, Dylan interrupted. Ethan Collins will be taking over strategic account management. He's got fresh ideas about how to optimize our client relationships. Ethan Collins. Isabel knew him from the quarterly meetings, early 30s, MBA from Northwestern, articulate in the way that impressed people who didn't ask too many follow-up questions. He'd been at Clarity Bridge for 18 months and had yet to close a major deal independently. Ethan doesn't have the relationships, Isabel said. These clients signed with Clarity Bridge specifically because of our work together over the past 2 years. They trust the company, Dylan said, firmly. Not individual employees. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to move away from. Isabel sat back in her chair, the full scope of what was happening beginning to crystallize. This wasn't just about organizational restructuring or investor optics. This was about erasing her from the narrative entirely, repositioning her wins as company victories that could be claimed by younger, more marketable faces. "What if I refuse?" she asked quietly. Lorraine's pen stopped moving. Dylan's smile became more strained. "Isabel, I hope you'll see this as an opportunity to contribute to Clarity Bridge's success in a different way. The compensation package remains the same, and you'll be eligible for performance bonuses based on operational metrics." "That's not what I asked." A longer silence filled the room. Dylan studied her face with the kind of cold calculation that reminded Isabel why she'd never warmed to him during his first months at the company. "Clarity Bridge is moving in a new direction," he said finally. "We need team members who are excited about that direction, who want to be part of building something bigger than themselves. If you're not interested in growing with us," the threat hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable, "accept the demotion, or find yourself looking for a new job at 59 in an industry that worshipped youth and innovation." Isabel looked at Lorraine, who was studiously avoiding eye contact, then back at Dylan. "When do I start?" "Tonight, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Tomas Rivera from Facilities will show you the protocols." Tomas, Isabel had known him for years, a gentle man in his 60s, who'd been at Clarity Bridge almost as long as she had. The thought of him witnessing her humiliation made her stomach clench. "I'll need to transition my current accounts." "That's already been handled," Dylan said, standing up. "Clean transition, no disruption to client relationships. Ethan's already been briefed on your ongoing projects." Of course he had. Isabel stood as well, her legs feeling unsteady. "And my office will be reassigned to support the new structure. Your personal items will be packed and moved to the security station." She walked out of conference room B in a daze, the fluorescent lights of the hallway seeming harsher than usual. Employees moved around her with their usual morning energy, discussing weekend plans and upcoming deadlines, oblivious to the fact that their colleague's career had just been demolished in a 20-minute meeting. Her office, the corner space with the river view that she'd earned through a decade of success, was already being emptied. 2 facilities workers were removing her diplomas from the wall, wrapping them in bubble wrap with the kind of efficiency that suggested they'd done this before. Patricia looked up from her desk, her face stricken. "Isabel, what?" "I've been reassigned," Isabel said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Internal operations. Night shift." Patricia's mouth fell open. "But the Fortune 500 contracts will be handled by someone else." Isabel walked into her office one last time, surveying the space that had been her professional home for years. The leather chair where she'd conducted countless client calls. The whiteboard covered with project timelines and strategic notes. The small succulent Rosa had given her for good luck, now sitting forlornly on the windowsill. She picked up the plant and walked back to Patricia's desk. "Could you make sure this gets to the security station? I'll be working there starting tonight." Patricia nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "This is wrong, Isabel. Everyone knows those contracts were your work. Sometimes what's right and what happens are 2 different things," Isabel said. "Take care of yourself, Patricia, and keep me posted on how the implementations go." She left the building without looking back, walking to her car with the measured stride that had carried her through decades of corporate challenges. But as she sat in the driver's seat, engine running, staring at the building where she'd built her career, the professional composure finally cracked. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just sat there, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over her like a heavy blanket. At 59, after 10 years of exemplary service and the biggest quarterly win in company history, She'd been demoted to a night security guard. The message was clear. She was too old, too established, too much of a reminder of what Clarity Bridge used to be. Dylan wanted a young, dynamic leadership team for his investor presentations, and Isabel didn't fit the image. But as she drove home to tell Rosa what had happened, a different kind of resolve began to form. They could take her office, her title, her carefully built position within the company, but they couldn't take her relationships, her reputation, or her knowledge of exactly how those Fortune 500 contracts had been won. For the first time in her career, Isabel Torres was about to discover what she was truly capable of when she had nothing left to lose. The Clarity Bridge building felt like a different world after dark. The bustling energy of daytime commerce had been replaced by the hollow echo of Isabel's footsteps on polished floors, the hum of servers in distant rooms, and the occasional whisper of the cleaning crew moving through empty offices like ghosts. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Isabel adjusted the security badge clipped to her plain black polo shirt, a uniform that felt like wearing shame. The shirt had been waiting for her in a plastic bag when she'd arrived at 7 p.m., along with a flashlight, a radio and a laminated card outlining her patrol protocols. Walk the perimeter every 2 hours, check door locks, monitor the parking garage, report any anomaly. She'd been a director of business development that morning. Now she was checking to make sure the copy machines were turned off. First night's always strange, said a gentle voice behind her. Isabel turned to find Tomas Rivera approaching with his usual unhurried gait, pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies. He was probably close to her age, maybe a few years older, with kind eyes and the weathered hands of someone who'd spent his life working with them. Tomas, she said, managing a smile. I guess we're colleagues now. He studied her face with the kind of attention that came from years of reading people's moods. I heard what happened. It's not right, what they did to you. The simple acknowledgement hit harder than she'd expected. All day she'd been surrounded by careful corporate language, professional euphemisms, and the studied neutrality of people who wanted to express sympathy without taking sides. Tomas was the first person to say plainly what everyone was thinking. It's just a different role, she said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Isabel, Tomas set down his cart and looked at her directly. I've been cleaning these offices for 12 years. I know what people do in their job. What they did to you, putting you on night security after you just brought in the biggest contracts in company history. That's not a different role. That's punishment. She felt her throat tighten. For what? For being too good at your job. For making the young CEO look like he doesn't know what he's doing. Tomas shook his head. I've seen this before. At other companies, new management comes in, wants to make everything look like their idea. Anyone who represents the old success becomes a problem. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling over them. Then, Tomas reached into his cart and pulled out a thermos. Coffee? He asked. Real coffee, not that machine stuff from the break room. Isabel accepted the offered cup gratefully. The coffee was strong and slightly sweet, with a hint of cinnamon that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. My wife makes it, Tomas said. She thinks the night shift is too lonely without good coffee. They began walking together through the corridors, Tomas pushing his cart while Isabel carried her flashlight and radio. The building revealed different secrets in the darkness, the executive offices that stayed lit all night, the conference rooms where whiteboards still held half-erased strategic plans, the cubicles where personal photos and motivational quotes created tiny shrines to individual ambition. You know what I noticed, Tomas said, as they passed the executive floor. Mr. Dillon's been having a lot of late meetings lately. Lawyers, consultants, people in expensive suits who don't look like they're here to buy software. Isabel paused. What kind of meeting? The kind where everyone talks quiet and takes notes. Had to empty the trash from that conference room 3 times last week. Lots of paper with numbers and graphs. He glanced at her sideways. Lots of paper with your name on it. A chill ran down Isabel's spine. Mine. Project reports, client profiles, contract summaries, all your work but with different names at the top. Tomas's voice carried a note of disgust. Like they're trying to rewrite history. Isabel stopped walking entirely. Tomas, Are you I don't read people's private papers on purpose, he said, but when you're emptying trash cans, you see things, and what I saw was your work getting credited to other people. Systematically, the implications hit her like a wave. It wasn't enough to demote her, they were actively erasing her contributions, preparing to present her victories as the achievements of Dylan's new leadership team. Every relationship she'd built, every strategy she'd developed, every innovation she'd brought to Clarity Bridge, was being harvested and repackaged. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Tomas was quiet for a long moment, his eyes focused on some distant point. My son is about your age. He's an engineer, works for a big company in Houston, smart kid, good at his job, but he's not young anymore, you know, and I see him getting worried about the same things you're dealing with, the young managers, the new ideas, the constant pressure to prove he's still relevant. He turned to look at her directly. I tell him what I'm telling you. Your value isn't measured by what some CEO thinks of you, it's measured by what you've built, what you know, what you can do, and they can't take that away from you no matter how hard they try. Isabel felt tears threatening for the first time since the morning's meeting. It doesn't feel that way right now, I know, but think about it. If you weren't valuable, why would they be working so hard to steal your work? If you weren't a threat, why would they need to push you out of sight? They resumed their patrol, moving through the building like night watchmen guarding secrets. As they passed the conference room where Isabel had celebrated with her team just 2 days ago, she saw that the whiteboard had been erased, the celebration balloons thrown away, all traces of her triumph methodically removed. You know what this place looks like at night? Tomas asked, gesturing around them. Less powerful, more hollow, all the impressive decorations and fancy furniture, but when the people leave, it's just empty space. Isabel nodded, understanding the metaphor. During the day, it feels so important, so permanent, but it's not. Companies come and go, buildings get sold, CEOs get replaced. Tomas stopped his cart beside a window overlooking the Austin skyline. But the work you did, the relationships you built, the people you helped, that's real, that travels with you. They stood looking out at the city lights, two people who'd spent their careers serving institutions that saw them as expendable. But in the quiet darkness, Isabel began to feel something she hadn't experienced since that morning's meeting. Clarity. Tomas, she said quietly. If you happen to see any more papers with my name on them, would you? Would I what? He asked innocently. Nothing. I shouldn't have. Isabel, he turned to face her fully. I've been cleaning offices for 12 years. I know how to make sure important documents don't accidentally get thrown away. Sometimes they get set aside, you know, for safekeeping. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. That's very thoughtful of you. Just doing my job, he said, making sure nothing valuable gets lost. They finished their patrol in companionable silence, two people who'd found an unexpected alliance in the margins of corporate life. As they prepared to part ways, Tomas to finish his cleaning rounds, Isabel to complete her security checks, he handed her a small piece of paper. My wife's phone number, he said. If you ever want to talk to someone who understands what it's like to be married to someone going through this, she's been through it herself. Isabel tucked the paper into her pocket, touched by the gesture. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, Tomas said with a knowing smile. I have a feeling you're just getting started. As she watched him disappear around the corner with his cart, Isabel felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of being underestimated. Dylan thought he'd neutralized her by hiding her away on the night shift, but he'd actually given her something more valuable than an office with a view. He'd given her time to think, space to plan, and the motivation of someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. Isabel Torres was about to discover what she was truly capable of when she stopped playing by their rules. It was nearly midnight when Isabel heard the soft footsteps echoing through the empty lobby. She looked up from her security desk, where she'd been reviewing building protocols while trying to push away thoughts of the client calls she should have been making and the implementations she should have been overseeing. Jasmine Doy appeared around the corner, her software engineer badge bouncing slightly as she walked. At 27, Jasmine was one of the brightest developers Isabel had ever worked with, quick to grasp complex problems, unafraid to challenge assumptions, and possessed of the kind of moral clarity that hadn't yet been worn down by corporate compromises. Jasmine Isabel stood up, surprised. "What are you doing here so late?" "Oh, you know, left my laptop charger." Jasmine's voice was casual, but her eyes kept darting toward the elevator banks. "Working on that integration module for the Sterling Industries rollout. Can't seem to find the right cable at home." Isabel knew it was a lie. Jasmine was the kind of person who kept backup chargers in her car, her desk, and probably her kitchen. More importantly, the Sterling Industries integration was one of the contracts that had been reassigned to Ethan Collins's team. "Jasmine, actually, Isabel, could I talk to you for a minute? Privately." The younger woman's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine anxiety underneath. "I mean, if you're not too busy with this." Isabel gestured toward the seating area near the lobby's floor-to-ceiling window. "Of course. What's going on?" They sat across from each other in chairs that were designed more raw aesthetics than comfort. Jasmine pulled out her phone, checked it, then put it away again. A nervous habit Isabel had noticed during their previous collaboration. "I need to tell you something," Jasmine said quietly. "About what's happening upstairs." Isabel's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I mean the meetings. The presentations. The way Jasmine struggled for words. "The way they're rewriting everything you did." Thomas mentioned he'd seen some documents. "It's worse than documents." Jasmine pulled out a small USB drive. "I have files. Presentations. Dylan's team has been putting together for the investor showcase next month. They've taken every major client win from the past 2 years and repositioned them as examples of the new leadership's strategic vision." Isabel stared at the drive. "Show me." Jasmine plugged it into her laptop, which had materialized from her bag along with the supposedly forgotten charge. The screen illuminated their faces as she navigated to a folder labeled Q4 Investor Deck. "Confidential." "Look at this," Jasmine said, opening a PowerPoint presentation. Slide 12. Isabel leaned forward. The slide was titled Strategic Account Acquisition, New Leadership Result. Below it was a timeline showing the 8 Fortune 500 contracts she'd closed, presented as a case study in Dylan's innovative approach to client relationship. "Every strategy you developed, every relationship you built, every late night you spent crafting custom solutions, it's all been reassigned to Ethan and his team." Isabel scrolled through the presentation, her stomach sinking with each slide. Her work, her insights, her years of relationship building had been seamlessly integrated into a narrative that positioned Dylan as a visionary leader who'd transformed Clarity Bridge's approach to enterprise sales. "There's more," Jasmine said, opening another file. "They're planning to use this presentation to announce a major restructuring. Your entire department is being dissolved and absorbed into what they're calling strategic growth operations. Everyone who worked under you is being reassigned to report to Ethan. When? Next week. They want to present it as a success story, how bringing in fresh leadership and eliminating redundant management layers led to record quarterly performance." Isabel sat back in her chair, feeling the full weight of the betrayal. It wasn't enough to sideline her, they were systematically dismantling everything she'd built while taking credit for her achievements. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Jasmine's cheeks flushed. "Because it's wrong. Because I've been in this industry for 5 years and I've never seen anything like what you accomplished this quarter. And because," she paused, struggling with something, "because you're the reason I'm still here." "What do you?" "Last year when I was struggling with that API integration for Cornerstone Systems, I was ready to quit. I thought I wasn't smart enough, wasn't experienced enough, wasn't whatever enough. You stayed late 3 nights in a row helping me work through the problem. Not because you had to, but because you saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself." Isabel remembered. Jasmine had been overwhelmed by a particularly complex technical challenge, and her confidence had cracked under the pressure. Isabel had recognized the signs. She'd been there herself, earlier in her career when imposter syndrome felt like it might swallow her whole. "You told me something that night," Jasmine continued. "You said that the best leaders don't just solve problems, they create space for other people to solve problems. You said that real success isn't about being the smartest person in the room, it's about making the room smarter." I remember, That's not what Dylan does. He makes decisions based on optics and investor presentations. He doesn't understand the technical challenges, or the client relationships, or the months of groundwork that make everything else possible. Jasmine's voice was gaining strength. And now he's trying to take credit for your work while pushing you out. Isabel studied the young woman's face, seeing in her expression the kind of moral outrage that reminded her of her own younger self. Jasmine, I appreciate you telling me this, but you need to be careful. If Dylan finds out you've been sharing confidential information, I've been careful, but I can't be quiet about this. It's not just about you, it's about what kind of company Clarity Bridge is going to become. If they can do this to you, what happens to the rest of us when we're no longer useful? Isabel looked at the USB drive, then back at Jasmine. What do you expect me to do with this information? I don't know, but I know you'll figure it out. And when you— Jasmine pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. That's my personal email and phone number. If you need someone who understands the technical side of what you built, someone who can verify the work you did, someone who remembers what really happened, call me. Isabel took the card, feeling the weight of the gesture. This could hurt your career. My career won't mean anything if I have to work for people who think loyalty and competence are weaknesses. Jasmine stood up, closing her laptop. Besides, I've been thinking about making a change anyway. This industry is full of companies that talk about innovation, but are afraid of anything that challenges their assumptions. She shouldered her bag, then looked back at Isabel. You know what I realized tonight? They didn't demote you because you were failing. They demoted you because you were succeeding in a way that made them look incompetent, and that tells me everything I need to know about who the real leader is. After Jasmine left, Isabel sat alone in the lobby staring at the USB drive. The building was quiet except for the distant hum of machinery and the occasional creak of settling structure. Through the windows, Austin's downtown lights twinkled like stars, each one representing someone else's ambition, someone else's struggle, someone else's late-night recalculation of what was possible. For the first time since her demotion, Isabel felt something other than humiliation or anger. She felt clarity. Dylan might control the narrative within Clarity Bridge, but he didn't control the relationship she'd built or the reputation she'd earned. He didn't own the trust her clients had placed in her personally, or the knowledge she'd accumulated through years of real-world problem-solving. Most importantly, he didn't control what she chose to do now. Isabel looked at her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found Marissa Choi's number. As head of strategic accounts at Apex Data, Marissa had been one of her most important client relationships, a woman who'd risen through the ranks of a male-dominated industry through sheer competence and strategic thinking. They'd worked together for 3 years, and Isabel had always sensed that Marissa valued their partnership beyond the typical vendor-client dynamic. There was a mutual respect there, an understanding between two women who'd had to prove themselves repeatedly in rooms full of men who assumed they didn't belong. Isabel composed a text message. Marissa, I hope you're well. I wanted to reach out about some changes at Clarity Bridge that might affect our ongoing projects. Would you have time for coffee this week? I'd like to discuss the transition in person. She stared at the message for a long moment before hitting send. It was carefully worded, professional, revealing nothing that could be construed as inappropriate. But it was also the first step toward something she'd never contemplated in her entire career, going around her employer to maintain direct relationships with clients. The response came faster than she'd expected. Isabel, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Yes, let's meet. Thursday, 10 a.m., Mozart's on Lake Austin. I have some questions about Clarity Bridge's new direction. Isabel felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with terror. Marissa's phrasing suggested she'd already heard something about the changes at Clarity Bridge. In an industry as interconnected as theirs, news traveled fast, especially when it involved major account restructuring. She tucked the phone away and returned to her security rounds, but her mind was already racing ahead to Thursday's meeting. For the first time in days, Isabel Torres was beginning to remember what it felt like to have a plan. The night shift suddenly didn't feel like exile anymore. It felt like preparation. The kitchen table had become a war room. Isabel spread out printed emails, contract summaries, and screenshots from Jasmine's USB drive, while Rosa moved between the stove and the counter, preparing their late dinner with the kind of focused efficiency that meant she was thinking hard about something. "So let me understand this," Rosa said, stirring the rice with more force than necessary. "They demoted you to night security 3 days after you brought in the biggest contracts in company history. Then they're presenting your work as their own innovation to investors next month." "That's the situation," Isabel confirmed, highlighting another section of Dylan's presentation deck. "They've systematically removed my name from every document, every strategy summary, every client profile. It's like I never exist." Rosa set down the wooden spoon and turned to face her wife fully. "Honey, you know what this sounds like to me: corporate politics, theft." Rosa's voice was flat, matter of fact. "They stole your work, and now they're trying to make you disappear so no one can contradict their story." Isabel had been thinking the same thing, but hearing Rosa say it so directly made the situation feel more real and somehow more manageable. Rosa had a way of cutting through emotional complexity to reach the practical core of any problem. "The question is," Rosa continued, "what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know what I can do. I signed a non-compete clause when I started at Clarity Bridge. I can't just walk away and take clients with me." "You can't solicit clients, but can you start consulting? Can you put your name out there and let people find you?" Isabel paused, her highlighter hovering over a page of client contact information. "I've never thought about going independent. The overhead, the business development, the administrative work." Rosa sat down across from her, reaching for her hands. "You just spent 2 years building relationships with 8 Fortune 500 companies. You created strategies that landed millions in contracts. You know more about enterprise software implementation than anyone in Austin. Why are you talking like you're not capable of running your own business?" The question hung in the air between them. Isabel realized she'd been so focused on the humiliation of her demotion that she'd forgotten to consider her own value outside of Clarity Bridge's structure. "I'm 59 years old," she said quietly. "Who's going to hire an independent consultant my age when they can get a younger team from an established firm? Who hired you to handle their most complex technical challenges for the past 3 years?" Rosa asked. "Who specifically requested you for their implementation teams? Who sent you Christmas cards because you saved their project?" Isabel looked down at the scattered papers, emails from clients praising her work, technical specifications she'd developed, strategic frameworks that had become industry standards. All of it bore her name, her thinking, her years of accumulated expertise. "What if I fail? What if you succeed?" Rosa countered. "What if you build something that's actually yours? What if you stop letting other people define your worth?" They worked through dinner, Rosa asking practical questions while Isabel outlined what independent consulting might look like. By 10 p.m., they had the skeleton of a business plan sketched out on Rosa's baking notebook. Torres Strategic Consulting, specializing in enterprise software implementation and client relationship management. "We'll need a website," Rosa said, making notes. "Something clean and professional. Your resume, case studies, client testimonials." "I can't use Clarity Bridge clients for testimonials. You can use clients who worked with you before Clarity Bridge. You can reference your successful implementations without naming current clients. You can let your work speak for itself." Isabel felt a flutter of excitement mixed with terror. The idea of being completely responsible for her own success was both thrilling and overwhelming. "What about the financial risk?" she asked. "What if no one hires me?" Rosa reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Honey, we have savings, we have this house, we have 23 years of marriage and 2 successful careers. We can take risks that single people can't. We can afford to bet on ourselves. But your bakery is doing fine, and will do even better when you're not coming home every night, stressed about corporate politics." Rosa smiled. "Besides, I've been thinking about expanding. Maybe it's time we both stopped playing it safe." They stayed up until midnight working through the logistics. Rosa's business experience managing suppliers, handling contracts, building customer relationships, translated directly to Isabel's situation. By the time they went to bed, Isabel had a plan for launching Torres Strategic Consulting within 2 weeks. More importantly, She had something she'd lost during her demotion: hope. The next morning, Isabel sat in her car outside Mozart's Coffee Roasters, watching the sunrise paint Lake Austin in shades of gold and pink. She'd arrived 30 minutes early, partly out of habit and partly because she needed time to prepare mentally for what might be the most important business conversation of her career. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rosa. "Remember who you are. Remember what you've built. Remember that you're not asking for favors, you're offering solutions." Isabel smiled, pocketing the phone as she walked into the coffee shop. The familiar sounds of grinding beans and steaming milk, the casual conversations of early morning customers, the warm smell of pastries, all of it felt like a different world from the sterile corporate environment she'd inhabited for the past decade. She ordered a cortado and claimed a table near the windows, spreading out a simple folder containing her hastily assembled consulting material. No PowerPoint presentations, no corporate branding, just clean summaries of her experience and a straightforward proposal for independent strategic consulting. At exactly 10 a.m., Marissa Choi walked through the door. She was dressed in her usual sharp business attire, but her expression was more relaxed than Isabel had ever seen it in a professional setting. "Isabel," Marissa said, embracing her warmly. "You look good, rested." "Thank you for meeting me," Isabel replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I know your schedule." "Isabel, stop." Marissa sat down, fixing her with a direct stare. "I've been waiting for this conversation. I heard about what happened at Clarity Bridge." Isabel felt her stomach tighten. "What did you hear?" "I heard that Dylan Pace is a short-sighted fool who just made the biggest mistake of his career." Marissa's voice was calm but edged with steel. "I also heard that he's planning to present your work as his team's innovation at some investor showcase." "How did you, Isabel?" "This industry isn't that big. Word travels fast, especially when it involves someone with your reputation." Marissa leaned forward. "What I want to know is, what are you going to do about it?" Isabel opened her folder, her hands steadier than she'd expected. "I'm going independent. Torres Strategic Consulting. I wanted to discuss how that might affect our ongoing projects." "Our ongoing projects?" Marissa laughed, but not unkindly. "Isabel, our projects were never with Clarity Bridge. They were with you. The only reason Apex Data stayed with that company was because you were there." The words hit Isabel like a physical force. "I don't understand. I tried working with other account managers at Clarity Bridge before you took over our relationship. They were competent, but they didn't understand our business. They tried to sell us solutions we didn't need, instead of listening to what we were actually trying to accomplish." Marissa pulled out her own folder. "You're the only person who ever took the time to understand our technical challenges and our business objectives. You built strategies that actually worked." Isabel stared at the woman across from her, realizing that she'd been thinking about client relationships all wrong. She'd assumed that loyalty was tied to companies, to brands, to institutional stability. But Marissa was telling her something different. Loyalty was personal, built on trust and competence, and shared success. "What are you saying?" "Isabel, I'm saying that Apex Data is interested in contracting with Torres Strategic Consulting for our next phase of infrastructure expansion. I'm saying that we've been unhappy with Clarity Bridge's direction for months, and your departure gives us the perfect opportunity to make a change." Marissa slid a document across the table. "This is a preliminary scope of work for a 6-month engagement. Similar to what we've done before, but with you setting the terms." Isabel looked at the document, her heart racing. The scope was substantial, exactly the kind of complex, high-value project that had made her reputation at Clarity Bridge. But this time her name would be on the contract. "Marissa, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. And I'm not doing it as a favor. I'm doing it because you're the best strategic consultant I've ever worked with, and I want to make sure my company has access to the best." Isabel felt tears threatening for the second time in a week, but these were different tears. These were tears of recognition, of possibility, of a future that suddenly looked very different than it had an hour ago. "There's one more thing," Marissa said. "I'm not the only one who's been thinking about this. I've had conversations with colleagues at other companies, People who've worked with you over the years, there's a lot of interest in what you might do next. Isabel looked out at the lake, where early morning kayakers were cutting through the calm water, each one charting their own course across the open expanse. For the first time in her career, she was about to do the same. When do we start? She asked. The Apex Data contract signing took place in Marissa's downtown office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the Austin skyline. Isabel arrived with her simple folder and a single pen, feeling both professional and slightly surreal, as she prepared to sign her first independent consulting agreement. Before we make this official, Marissa said, settling into her chair, I want to be completely transparent about something. This decision isn't just about your capabilities, it's about what's happening at Clarity Bridge. Isabel looked up from the contract. What do you mean? I mean that Dylan Pace called me personally last week. He wanted to reassure Apex Data that the transition in account management wouldn't affect the quality of our service relationship. Marissa's expression was carefully neutral. He spent 20 minutes explaining how Ethan Collins was going to bring fresh perspectives to our strategic planning. And Ethan Collins doesn't know the difference between our legacy systems and our new infrastructure. He spent our introductory call trying to sell me solutions we implemented 2 years ago. Marissa shook her head. Dylan's so focused on optics that he didn't bother to ensure his new team actually understood our business. Isabel felt a mix of vindication and concern. Are other clients having similar experiences? I've been making some calls. Let's just say that confidence in Clarity Bridge's new direction is mixed. Marissa pulled out her phone and showed Isabel a text message thread. This is from Jennifer Walsh at Pinnacle Corp. She's been asking around about how to reach you direct. Isabel read the messages, her pulse quickening. Jennifer had been one of her most challenging clients, a demanding perfectionist who'd initially been skeptical of Clarity Bridge's capability. But over 18 months of collaboration, they'd built a relationship based on mutual respect and shared problem-solving. She's not happy with the transition. She's furious. Apparently, Ethan suggested streamlining their implementation by removing some of the custom integrations you'd designed specifically for their workflow. Marissa tucked her phone away. Jennifer told me she'd rather work with you independently than deal with Clarity Bridge's new approach. Isabel stared at the contract in front of her, suddenly understanding the full scope of what was happening. It wasn't just about her reputation or her career, it was about the fundamental difference between relationship-based business development and corporate brand marketing. How many others? She asked quietly. I don't know exactly, but I know that Oliver Green at Meridian Logistics has been asking pointed questions about Clarity Bridge's commitment to existing client relationships. And Marcus Chen from Sterling Industries mentioned that his last conversation with Dylan felt more like a sales pitch than a strategic consultation. Isabel signed the contract with hands that were steadier than she'd expected. As she handed it back to Marissa, she felt the weight of what she'd just committed to, not just the specific project, but the larger declaration of independence it represented. Thank you, she said, for taking this risk. Isabel, I'm not taking a risk. I'm making a smart business decision. Marissa stood up, extending her hand. But I am curious about one thing. What are you going to do about the other clients who want to work with you? It was a question Isabel had been avoiding, partly because of the legal implications and partly because she still couldn't quite believe that her professional relationships were strong enough to survive outside of Clarity Bridge's institutional framework. I don't know, she admitted. I can't actively solicit Clarity Bridge clients, but if they reach out to me, they will, Marissa said confidently, and when they do, you'll need to be ready to handle multiple complex implementations simultaneously. That's a different kind of challenge than working within a corporate structure. Isabel nodded, already thinking about the logistics. Independent consulting meant she'd need to manage everything from project coordination to billing to technical support. It was daunting, but also exhilarating in a way that corporate employment had never been. I have a suggestion, Marissa continued. There's a woman I know, Rosa Martinez. She runs a small business consulting firm. She specializes in helping established professionals transition to independent practice. Might be worth a conversation. Actually, Isabel said, smiling for the first time in days. Rosa is my wife. She's been helping me think through the business structure, Marissa's eyebrows rose. Rosa Martinez Torres is your wife? I had no idea. She helped my sister launch her catering business 3 years ago. Small world. Very small, and getting smaller every day apparently. They walked to the elevator together, the signed contract tucked safely in Isabel's portfolio. As the doors closed, Marissa turned to her with a serious expression. Isabel, I want you to know that what happened at Clarity Bridge is going to have consequences, not just for you, but for Dylan and his team. The enterprise software industry runs on relationships and trust, and he's damaged both. People are watching to see how this plays out. What do you mean? I mean that how you handle this transition is going to define not just your career, but your reputation in the industry. You have an opportunity to show that real expertise and genuine client relationships matter more than corporate politics and investor presentations. The elevator reached the ground floor, and Isabel stepped out into the bustling lobby of the downtown office building. Around her, dozens of professionals moved with purpose, each carrying their own ambitions and challenges, and careful calculations about risk and reward. No pressure, she said, but she was smiling. No pressure, Marissa agreed. Just opportunity. Isabel walked to her car with a lightness she hadn't felt in months. The Apex data contract represented more than just income. It was validation that her work had value independent of any corporate structure. It was proof that the relationships she'd built over the years were real and transferable. More importantly, it was the beginning of something entirely new. Her phone rang as she was pulling out of the parking garage. The caller ID showed Jennifer Walsh from Pinnacle Corp. Isabel answered on the second ring. Jennifer, how are you? Isabel, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. Is it true that you're no longer with Clarity Bridge? I'm transitioning to independent consulting. Torres Strategic Consulting. Perfect. I need to talk to you about our implementation project. Ethan Collins wants to make changes that would completely undermine the architecture we've spent months developing. Can we meet this week? Isabel pulled over to the side of the road, her heart racing. Of course. What's your availability? How about tomorrow? I have meetings all day, but I'm free for dinner, unless you prefer something more formal. Dinner works. Where would you like to meet? Do you know Uchi? I'll make a reservation for 7. Isabel hung up and sat in her car, staring at the phone. 2 clients in 2 days. Both reaching out to her directly, both dissatisfied with Clarity Bridge's new direction, both interested in working with her independently. She called Rosa. How did it go? Rosa answered before Isabel could speak. I signed the Apex data contract. And Jennifer Walsh just called about meeting tomorrow. Jennifer Walsh from Pinnacle Corp. The one who sent you that bottle of wine after the integration went live. That's the one. Rosa, I think this is really happening. I think clients are actually going to follow me. Of course they are. I told you, relationships matter more than corporate brands. People work with people they trust. Isabel started the car and pulled back into traffic, her mind already shifting to the practical challenges of managing multiple client relationships simultaneously. She'd need better project management systems, formal contract templates, maybe even subcontractors for technical implementation. But for the first time in her career, the challenges felt like opportunities rather than obstacles. She was building something that belonged to her, something that reflected her values and her approach to business. Isabel Torres was finally working for herself. The guest bedroom had been transformed into something that might generously be called a home office. Isabel had moved in a small desk, 2 monitors, and a whiteboard that took up most of one wall. Rosa had contributed a comfortable chair and a small refrigerator stocked with sparkling water and healthy snacks. It's not much, Isabel said, surveying the cramped space, but it's mine. It's perfect, Rosa replied, setting down a fresh cup of coffee. Every empire starts with a single room and a good idea. Isabel was reviewing the technical specifications for the Pinnacle Corp project, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Isabel, this is Tomas from Clarity Bridge. Can you call me when you have a chance? It's important. She stepped outside to make the call, wondering what kind of trouble Tomas might be in for their late-night conversations. Tomas? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's right. His voice carried a note of excitement she'd never heard before. I have something for you. Documents that got misfiled instead of thrown away. Can you meet me somewhere? 20 minutes later, Isabel sat across from Tomas in a small diner near his neighborhood, watching him pull manila folders from a worn back. I told you I'd been seeing papers with your name on them, he said, sliding the folders across the table. Well, I kept some of them. Thought they might be important someday. Isabel opened the first folder and found herself looking at original versions of project proposals, client communications, and strategic frameworks, all bearing her name, all dated months before Dylan's team had supposedly developed them. Tomas, this is evidence. This proves that they stole my work. That's what I figured. But there's more. He opened the second folder. These are emails between Dylan and some consultant firm. They're planning to present your strategies as case studies in something called disruptive leadership methodology. Isabel read through the correspondence, her anger building with each page. Dylan wasn't just stealing her work, he was packaging it as his own intellectual property, preparing to sell it to other companies as a proprietary consulting methodology. They're going to monetize my strategies, she said quietly. Gets worse. Look at this. Tomas pointed to an email thread about trademark applications. They're trying to trademark some of your frameworks. Make it so no one else can use. Isabel stared at the documents, feeling a cold clarity settle over her. Dylan wasn't just trying to erase her from Clarity Bridge's history, he was trying to own her professional innovations entirely. Tomas, why are you doing that if they find out you took these documents? They already let me go, he said matter-of-factly. Effective Friday, said they were streamlining facilities operations, and my position was redundant. Isabel felt a stab of guilt. Because you were helping? Because I was 63 years old and made more money than the 25-year-old they hired to replace me, Tomas shrugged. But yes, probably also because I was asking too many questions about why important documents were being thrown away. I'm sorry, I never meant for you to. Isabel, stop. You think I'm upset about losing a job where I had to watch good people get treated like garbage? I'm relieved. And I'm proud that I could help you understand what was really happening. Isabel looked at the documents spread across the table, suddenly understanding that she wasn't just building a consulting business. She was preparing for a war. Dylan's actions weren't just unethical, they were potentially illegal. And now she had proof. What will you do now? She asked. I've been thinking about that. My wife has been wanting to visit our grandchildren in San Antonio. Maybe it's time for a long vacation. He smiled. But first, I want to make sure these documents get to the right person. I don't know what to do with this information. I think you do. I think you know exactly what to do. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet. Isabel gathered up the papers, her mind racing. The evidence was damning, but using it would mean escalating beyond simple client retention to active legal confrontation. It would mean declaring war on Clarity Bridge and everyone who'd participated in erasing her contributions. Thank you, she said finally. For everything, for seeing what was happening, for caring enough to document it, for trusting me with this. Don't thank me yet, Tomas said. Use it. Don't let them get away with stealing your life's work. That evening, Isabel spread the documents across her kitchen table while Rosa prepared dinner. The evidence was overwhelming. Original emails, draft proposals, strategic frameworks, all proving that the innovations Dylan was claiming had been developed months earlier by Isabel. This is bigger than just taking credit, Rosa said, reading over her shoulder. This is theft of intellectual property. This is fraud, I know, but what can I do about it? Corporate litigation takes years, costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and even if I win, the damage to my reputation. What damage? You'd be the person who stood up for herself against corporate theft. You'd be the person who proved that integrity matters more than politics. Isabel looked at her wife, seeing the fierce protectiveness that had drawn her to Rosa 25 years ago. You really think I should fight this? I think you should stop letting other people define what's possible for you. You've spent your whole career being reasonable, being accommodating, being the person who makes things work smoothly. Maybe it's time to be the person who makes things right. They talked through the options until well past midnight. Isabel could continue building her consulting practice quietly, hoping to succeed through superior service and client relationships. Or she could use Tomas's evidence to expose Dylan's actions publicly, potentially damaging Clarity Bridge, but also risking her own reputation. There's a third option, Rosa said finally. You could do both, build your business and document what really happened. Let your success speak for itself while ensuring that the truth is preserved. Isabel nodded slowly, a record of what actually happened for anyone who wants to know. Exactly. You're not seeking revenge, you're seeking justice. And sometimes justice is just making sure the truth survives. The next morning, Isabel called Jasmine to discuss the technical aspects of the Pinnacle Corp project, but the conversation quickly turned to the broader situation at Clarity Bridge. It's getting worse, Jasmine's. Dylan's planning to announce the departmental restructuring at the all-hands meeting next week. He's going to present it as a success story about how eliminating legacy management structures led to record growth. Are you okay with your job? I mean, for now. But I've been thinking about what you said, about building something that reflects your values. I've been looking at other opportunities. Isabel took a breath, then made a decision that surprised her. Would you be interested in contract work? I'm going to need technical support for these implementations, and I'd rather work with someone I trust. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a choice. You can stay at Clarity Bridge and watch Dylan take credit for other people's work, or you can help me build something different. Something where competence matters more than politics. There was a long pause. When do I start? Isabel smiled, feeling another piece of her new life click into place. How about we start with the Pinnacle Corp project? I'll need a technical architect who understands their legacy system. Isabel, you should know, I'm not the only person who's been thinking about leaving. Marcus Chen has been asking questions about your new consulting business, and Patricia from your old department has been updating her resume. Really? What you built at Clarity Bridge wasn't just a client portfolio, it was a team, and teams are portable. After hanging up, Isabel sat in her small office, looking at the whiteboard covered with project timelines and client objectives. She was building something entirely new, something that didn't exist in any corporate structure she'd ever known. She was building a business based on relationships, competence, and the radical idea that good work should be rewarded rather than stolen. For the first time in her life, Isabel Torres was playing by her own rules. The first sign that something was shifting came on a Tuesday morning when Isabel's phone rang at 7. The caller ID showed Oliver Green, CEO of Meridian Logistics, a gruff, no-nonsense man who'd built his company from a single truck into a nationwide operation. Isabel, glad I caught you. Oliver's voice carried its usual directness. We need to talk. Can you meet me this afternoon? Of course. What's this about? Clarity Bridge, and why I'm about to fire them. They met at a barbecue joint on the east side, the kind of place where Oliver felt comfortable conducting business away from corporate conference rooms. Isabel arrived to find him already seated, a plate of brisket in front of him, and a stern expression on his weathered face. Sit down, he said without preamble. I've got something to tell you, and you're not going to like it. Isabel settled into the booth, her stomach tightening. What happened? That boy Dylan came to see me last week. Wanted to present what he called strategic optimization opportunities for our logistics platform. Oliver's voice carried a note of disgust. Spent 2 hours trying to convince me that the system you designed was outdated and needed to be replaced. Replaced? With what? Some cookie-cutter solution that would save money but eliminate half the custom integrations that make our operations work. Oliver leaned forward. Isabel, I've been in this business for 30 years. I know when someone's trying to sell me something I don't need. Isabel felt a familiar anger building. What did you tell him? I told him that the current system was designed by the smartest person I'd ever worked with, and if he wanted to change it, he'd better have a damn good reason. Oliver's expression hardened. Know what he said? He said you were no longer with the strategic team, and that fresh perspectives were needed to drive innovation. And I told him that if Isabel Torres wasn't on the strategic team, then Meridian Logistics wasn't interested in working with Clarity Bridge. Oliver pushed his plate away. I'm terminating our contract. Effective immediately. Isabel stared at him. Oliver, you don't have to. I'm not doing this as a favor. I'm doing it as a business decision. You designed a system that increased our efficiency by 30% and reduced our operational costs by $2 million annually. Dylan wants to replace it with something that might save us money up front, but would cost us more in the long run. He pulled out a contract and slid it across the table. This is an independent consulting agreement. I want you to continue managing our technical infrastructure, but I want you to do it on your own terms. Isabel looked at the document. Her heart raced. The scope was substantial, not just system maintenance, but strategic expansion planning for Meridian's growth into new markets. This is a significant engagement, she said. It's what your work is worth, and it's what I'm willing to pay to ensure that my company continues to work with competent people instead of corporate politicians. Isabel signed the contract, feeling the weight of another major decision. With Apex Data, Pinnacle Corp, and now Meridian Logistics, she was building a client base that could sustain a serious consulting practice. There's something else, Oliver said. I've been talking to other CEOs about this situation. Word is spreading that Clarity Bridge is making changes that don't serve their clients' interests. What kind of word? The kind that matters. Marcus Chen from Sterling Industries is asking questions about working with you direct. Jennifer Walsh has been telling people that Pinnacle Corp is getting better service from your independent consulting than they ever got from Clarity Bridge. Isabel felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. How many others? I don't know exactly, but I know that trust is the foundation of business relationships, and Dylan has damaged that trust. Oliver stood up, extending his hand. People are watching to see how this plays out, and right now you're winning. As Isabel drove home, her phone rang twice. First Marcus Chen requesting a meeting, then David Kumar from Apex Industries asking about her availability for a strategic consultation. By the time she reached her driveway, she had 4 voice messages from other clients wanting to discuss transitioning to independent engagements. The corporate ecosystem was shifting, and Isabel was at the center of. That evening, she sat with Rosa at their kitchen table, reviewing the day's developments. The contrast with her situation just 2 weeks ago was almost surreal. How are you feeling? Rosa asked, watching Isabel process the rapid changes. Overwhelmed, excited, terrified, all at the same time. Isabel looked at the contracts spread across the table. This is really happening. Clients are actually choosing to work with me instead of Clarity Bridge. You sound surprised. I am surprised. I spent so many years thinking that my value was tied to the company I worked for, that clients were loyal to brands rather than people. But it turns out that's not true, at least not in relationships where trust and competence matter. Rosa smiled. It's almost like people prefer working with someone who understands their business and cares about their success. Revolutionary concept, Isabel said with a laugh. But Rosa, I'm going to need help, real help. This is more work than I can handle alone. What kind of help? Project management, contract administration, technical coordination. I need to build a team. Well, you've got Jasmine for technical work. And you mentioned that Marcus and Patricia might be interested in making a change. It's risky for them. Leaving stable corporate jobs to work for a consulting firm that's 2 weeks old, maybe. But it's also risky to stay at a company where competence is less valued than politics. Some people prefer the risk of building something new over the risk of watching their careers slowly erode. Isabel's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Isabel, this is Marcus Chen. I've been thinking about our conversation. Would you be interested in discussing a partnership? I have some ideas about how we could work together. She showed the message to Rosa, who grinned. People want to work with people they respect, and they especially want to work with people who've proven they can succeed on their own terms. I need to be careful about how I handle this. I don't want to be seen as actively recruiting Clarity Bridge employees. You're not recruiting anyone. You're building a business, and good people are attracted to good opportunities. If Clarity Bridge can't retain their best employees, that's Dylan's problem, not yours. Later that evening, Isabel received an email from Jasmine with the subject line, "Urgent, you need to see this." The message contained a link to a local business journal article titled, Clarity Bridge faces client retention challenges. The article was brief but damaging. It reported that several major clients had recently terminated their contracts with Clarity Bridge, citing concerns about changes in service quality and strategic direction. The piece quoted Oliver Green, saying that his company was seeking consulting partners who prioritize client relationships over corporate restructuring. Isabel felt a complex mix of emotions reading the article. Part of her was satisfied that Dylan's actions were having consequences, but another part felt genuine concern for her former colleagues, who were now dealing with the fallout from decisions they hadn't made. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed Dylan Pace. Isabel hesitated, then answered. "Dylan, Isabel, we need to talk. This situation has gotten out of hand." "What situation?" "You know what situation. My clients are terminating contracts because of some misunderstanding about your transition to a new role." Isabel felt her jaw tighten. "My clients, Clarity Bridge clients, and we need to find a way to resolve this professionally. I think you should talk to your clients about why they're choosing to work elsewhere." "I haven't solicited anyone." "You haven't solicited anyone, Isabel. You're actively competing with your former employer using relationships you developed while working for us. I'm providing consulting services to companies that chose to hire me independently. That's not the same thing as soliciting." There was a long pause. "We need to discuss this in person. Can you come in tomorrow?" Isabel looked at Rosa, who was listening to the conversation with raised eyebrows. "I don't think that's necessary, Dylan. My relationship with Clarity Bridge ended when you demoted me to night security. If you have legal concerns, you should speak with your attorney." "Isabel, good luck with your investor presentation," she said, and hung up. Rosa stared at her. "That was overdue," Isabel finished. "I spent 2 weeks letting them define the terms of this situation. I think it's time I started defining them myself." For the first time since her demotion, Isabel Torres felt like she was exactly where she belongs. Dylan's investor showcase was scheduled for a Thursday evening at the Four Seasons, complete with cocktails, presentation screens, and carefully staged networking opportunity. Isabel learned about it from Jasmine, who'd been asked to prepare technical demonstrations that showcased Clarity Bridge's innovative methodologies. "He's using your frameworks as case studies," Jasmine reported during their weekly check-in. "The Fortune 500 implementations, the relationship management strategies, even the technical architecture you developed for Meridian Logistics. Everything's been rebranded as examples of his disruptive leadership approach." Isabel felt the familiar anger, but it was tempered now by something else: confidence. "What's the timeline?" "Presentation starts at 7. He's expecting major investors, potential acquisition partners, maybe some industry press." Jasmine paused. "Isabel, there's something else. I've been documenting everything: emails, presentations, meeting notes that prove whose work is whose. If you want to challenge this publicly, I'm not going to disrupt his presentation," Isabel said. "I'm going to let my work speak for itself." That afternoon, Isabel sent a simple email to her client list: Torres Strategic Consulting, 6-month progress report. The attachment contained case studies, client testimonials, and implementation results that demonstrated the real impact of her methodology. Within hours, her phone was ringing with calls from investors who'd received Dylan's presentation materials and wanted to understand why the same strategies were being credited to 2 different sources. The truth, it turned out, had a way of surfacing on its own. 6 months later, Isabel sat on her back porch with Rosa, watching the sunrise paint Austin's skyline in shades of gold and amber. Steam rose from their coffee cups as Isabel reviewed the morning's emails: 3 new client inquiries, a speaking invitation from an industry conference, and a message from Marcus Chen, confirming his decision to join Torres Strategic Consulting as a full partner. "How does it feel?" Rosa asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Different," Isabel said, scrolling through the messages. "Good, different. Like I'm finally working for someone whose values align with mine." "Yourself?" "Exactly," Isabel smiled, pocketing her phone. "Apex Data just signed an extension for another year. Pinnacle Corp wants to expand our engagement to include their European operations, and Oliver Green recommended us to 2 other logistics companies." The business had grown beyond anything she'd imagined when she'd started with that cramped guest bedroom office. Torres Strategic Consulting now employed 5 people, maintained relationships with 12 major clients, and had a waiting list of companies seeking their services. What about Clarity Bridge? Rosa asked. Dylan left 3 months ago. New investors brought in someone who actually understands client relationships. Isabel paused, thinking about the occasional updates she received from former colleagues. They've tried to rebuild, but trust takes time to restore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tomas. Saw the article in Austin Business Journal. Proud of you, Misha. You showed them that dignity wins in the end. Isabel looked out at the city where she'd spent her career, where she'd built relationships that had sustained her through corporate upheaval and personal reinvention. For the first time in decades, she felt truly free, not just from corporate politics, but from the limiting belief that her worth was determined by other people's recognition. Ready for another day of building something that matters? Rosa asked. Isabel stood up, phone already ringing with the first call of the day. Absolutely. Up next we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, it would mean a lot.